evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Anne Collins Goodyear, co-director of the Bowdoin College Museum of Art, and we're delighted that you can join us this evening for a conversation with the painter Katherine Bradford. As Kathy has noted, she is a Brunswick painter, but she also has a strong connection to Brooklyn, splitting her time between Maine and New York. She is well known for her bold, colorful canvases, many of which evoke quasi-dreamscapes with rich metaphorical overtones. Cognizant of human vulnerability, Bradford's paintings embrace both the humor and the pathos of the human condition, a poignant analog, it seems to me, for lived experience. As is well known to this audience, the strength and nuance of her work has earned Kathy well-deserved recognition, including awards from the John Simon Guggenheim Foundation, the Joan Mitchell Foundation, the Pollock Krasner Foundation, the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and this summer, the Women of Vision Maine and America Award from the Farnsworth Art Museum. Her work has been widely exhibited and collected by leading art institutions around the world, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Brooklyn Museum, the Dallas Museum of Art, the Menil Collection in Houston, the Institute of Contemporary Art in Boston, the Portland Museum of Art, and of course, the BCMA. This summer, here in Northern New England, her work is on view at the Farnsworth and Caldbeck Gallery in Rockland, the Hall Foundation in Reading, Vermont, and here at Bowdoin. This coming fall, Kathy's painting will be included in an exhibition at the Carpenter Center at Harvard, and next summer, a major multi-venue retrospective of her work will open at the Portland Museum of Art. This evening's conversation with Katherine Bradford will center on her recent painting, Fear of Dark, created last summer here in Brunswick, in the midst of the global pandemic and the explosion of a national reckoning around racism. Kathy will contextualize the work relative to related projects, as well as offering a detailed description of the painting's evolution and development. The Bowdoin College Museum of Art is honored to have received this work through the generosity of David and Barbara Rue, and is thrilled that the work is now on view in our current exhibition, Transformations, New Acquisitions of Global Contemporary Art, through January 30th. We hope that you will have an opportunity to see the work in person if you have not already had a chance to do so. And I hope you'll see the painting in this small background behind me on view in our galleries, along with the work of a number of other Maine artists, including Shoshana White and Ellen Golden. So we hope to see you soon, but certainly before January 30th. Our conversation this evening will last approximately 45 minutes, following which we look forward to taking your questions. The program as a whole will run approximately an hour. Please submit your questions through the Q&A function. Although the questions won't appear on screen, they will be visible to Kathy and me. We also want to note that the live captioning tool is available. Please simply click the live captioning button to activate it. And now, please join me virtually in a warm welcome for Kathy Bradford. Kathy, we are delighted to have you with us. It's such a treat. And as I was anticipating this conversation and thinking a little bit about how it might unfold, I couldn't help but think back to our earliest introduction, which actually came shortly after Frank and I had an opportunity to move to Maine and were welcomed with warm embrace into this community. And in the summer of 2013, our colleague Joachim Hohmann organized a beautiful installation of your paintings, appropriately enough titled August. And I must say, the entire exhibition was striking to me. but I particularly loved Diver Blue Red, which at that time had just recently been completed. And one of the things that it suggests to me is joy, as well as fearlessness. But of course, as we think about what fearlessness might represent with a giant leap into the sky or into a void, also brings to mind the flip side of the coin, and that is the acknowledgement of something that might cause us trepidation. And that brings to mind another August, and that is, of course, August of 2020, when Frank and I had an opportunity to visit you at your studio here in the Mill in Brunswick. And at that time, I think all of us were very cognizant of the degree to which trepidation, uncertainty was sweeping our society, was indeed a fact of life. And this painting, again, we see a shot of it on view. Fear of Dark was one of the paintings that grew out of that extraordinary moment of uncertainty. And we are absolutely delighted that it has become part of the permanent collection of the museum, and are enormously grateful to Barb and David Rue for making it available to us. So Kathy, let's dive in to talking a little bit about this painting. But before we really dive into some of the circumstances that helped to bring it into existence, I want to acknowledge the fact that we are gathered tonight virtually. We all look forward to the time when we can once again gather in person in groups around works of art. But because this painting can't be present with us in real space, I just want to talk with you a little bit about the reproduction itself. And on that note, Kathy, I'm just going to share another reproduction of this painting, which I think caused you a little bit of consternation. And I just would invite you to maybe explain to our audiences what made this reproduction so problematic.
Hi, Anne.
Hi, Kathy.
I'm talking to you from Brunswick, Maine, from my old farmhouse. And you know, as a young artist, I started painting right here in Brunswick, Maine. And I had my very first solo show at Corsican Pizza, which was right behind where Hannaford's is. And I would drive by the Bowdoin Museum and learn a lot from stopping in there. And you know, I can't say I dreamed of being part of it, because I didn't even think to have that dream. And so I'm just so happy to be a part of the museum today. As the years went by, some very nice things happened. And I thank you, Anne, the museum, and the Rue family. And here I am having a conversation with you today.
Kathy, it is such a joy for us to have your work so beautifully represented in the collection, and to know what an important resource this community has been in the development of your work. And it was incredibly exciting to have an opportunity to see this piece taking shape last summer. And I hope that everybody will have a chance to see it in person. But in preparing for our conversation this evening, one of the things that I found really intriguing was intriguing and important was your sensitivity to the reproduction of the painting. And I'm happy to say that this is Bowdoin's reproduction, but there was another reproduction, Kathy, that you also alerted me to that did not quite capture the spirit of the painting.
Do
And
you have the image of that?
yes, and so let's move forward where we can actually see the contrast between the reproductions a little bit more clearly.
I felt that although this painting is called Fear of Dark, that it's actually about light. Of course, the two go together. And I wanted it, when it was shown online, to look like the painting. And sometimes it was just too dark. It didn't have a luminosity. So I showed Anne, I said, see, here's what the painting I hope looks like. And the bottom one is just too dark. The tone is not hopeful enough, is not light filled, is not luminous. And Anne received that comment and thought it was interesting.
I think it's so important, Kathy, because it does, as you point out, get at some of the deeper philosophical nuances of the painting. It's a painting that you've described as a night painting, but at the same time, as you point out, a painting that does capture luminosity and perhaps in so doing, captures something of a spirit of hopefulness, despite circumstances that were, of course, extremely difficult last summer, last August, as you undertook this piece.
Exactly. I think that's true. I think I wanted to put light in the sky, not necessarily stars, not necessarily planets, but my own invention of lighted orbs of different colors. Yes, I think they are a sign of hopefulness up there. The three figures sitting on each other's laps are in a state of maybe solace because they have each other. But it was a time of great consternation when we needed each other. We wanted to be together.
Absolutely. And Kathy, this is a painting that has received a great deal of attention since it first went into the public eye last spring in New York at an exhibition at Canada Gallery. One of the commentators who focused his attention on it, of course, was the art critic John Yao. And I wondered if you might be able to say a little bit about what it is about this painting that you think makes it so significant, and perhaps a little bit thematically about what you understood yourself trying to accomplish with this really extraordinary and very complex painting.
Do you think we could look at the context, the room where this was shown? There were 6 paintings.
Absolutely. Let's do that. And Kathy, I'm going to show a little video which gives us some sense of.
This is called Fever. This is called Motherhood. Here we have The Lap, then Fear of Dark, 2 very colorful paintings, and the last one called Mother Joins the Circus. So the suite of paintings I called mother paintings, meaning the archetype mother. I mean, it was open to a lot of interpretations.
And Kathy, maybe we could just pause for a moment on that notion of motherhood and the archetype mother. This is a slide that specifically focuses in on that last painting that was visible in the scan of Canada Gallery, a painting called Mother Joins the Circus, second version from 2021. And while it's an archetypal painting, I believe that there's also a little bit of biographical, autobiographical content in it. And maybe it would be interesting to flesh that out for a moment.
Well, I love the phrase "Mother joins the circus." I think it's funny. we all have a mother, and we actually don't want her to join the circus because joining the circus is a little too far out for a mother. And I realized that perhaps my own children looked at me and on my wish to be an artist, to join the art world, that I was joining a kind of circus. And that was bothersome to them when they were younger. I'm not sure that they've come to terms with that. But so this is a little bit of a joke on myself and my situation. The mother, I suppose, is the figure in blue. And some people thought that these two people were loading her into the circus cannon. I'm not sure about that. They're just carrying her somewhere. The theme of people carrying other people is something that I've done quite a few paintings about. You know, I do paintings and then afterwards I think about what they might mean and the implications. And I think that's especially true of this painting, because I lost the, I didn't feel it was so important to have my paintings make sense. There's a little bit of whimsy and absurdity in my work, and I let it come in. I saw people enjoying it. And as long as I could live with it, then I thought that was okay. And I think that's especially true of this particular painting, which I realized people had many interpretations. They had their own reasons for why these people are doing what they're doing. I'm just giving you one that I finally came up with.
And Kathy, one of the most striking elements of this painting to me is the figure over on the left, who actually might be floating. She might be a vision, but it's part of this wonderful topsy-turvy world that you seem to be creating for us. And could you say a few words about her and why she finds herself in that orientation relative to the painting as a whole?
Well, actually, a close friend of mine, the painter Rick Briggs, told me I should correct that I didn't need it. Why was this person standing like that? It just was really didn't make sense. And usually when people give me a good suggestion, a thoughtful suggestion, I act on it. But this time I thought, no, I'm going to leave that pink woman standing on her head. And I don't know why she's there. I needed her visually.
But oh, sorry, go ahead, Kathy. I didn't mean to cut you.
No, I don't have anything.
What I was going to say, though, one of the things that makes its deliberateness, I think, so forceful, in fact, is the fact that there are some other parts of this canvas that I think did evolve as the work was being created. And I believe that there may have been two, and I don't know if you can see my arrow or not on the screen, but two adjustments to the heads of the figures carrying the mother. It looks as though there may be collage elements, perhaps a piece of canvas that has been collaged over the surface.
Yeah, that's right. There are two big patches on this painting. And I was asked many times, well, why are there two patches there? And it was because I changed my mind. I moved the heads so they were more tilting. The whole painting needed to be more dynamic. You know, that's the agony of making a painting. You look at it for a while and you realize there's something wrong with it. Then you have to diagnose what is wrong. And then you have to figure out how you can change it without ruining it. And sometimes you do ruin it. So I thought those two patches would make the two heads more interesting, but I realized I had to actually move the two heads. But the fact is that Fear of Dark was a painting in this series of mother paintings. It was a nocturne. It was the most serious, the most somber, maybe the most grief-filled. I don't know. I think there's beauty in the light and the transparency. But this one was chosen for Bowdoin, and I'm so happy I'll get to visit it, unlike the other paintings, which are gone out into the world. For instance, the red painting, this is
Here,
called,
let's go back to the video for a moment.
this is called Fever, and the painting next to it is called Motherhood, and then this red painting called Mother's Lap has been acquired by the Brooklyn Museum in New York, which is great. And that is sort of the companion painting and was displayed next to Fear of Dark, which was also a lap sitting painting.
It is so exciting, Kathy, to see these pieces in their larger context. And one of the things that I especially love about this painting, Fever, is its perhaps its acknowledgement of the pandemic, the presence or the fear of illness that was with all of us for well over a year. In fact, the specter of illness has not completely shaken us, as we know. But the way in which it also suggests a certain solicitation and a form of caring and warmth and support among the figures who are present on the canvas.
Yes, I think it was important in the mix that I came out and acknowledged sickness, the fever, the hand on the forehead, along with the lap sitters and the mother joining the circus.
Mm-hmm.
And the one next to this painting called Motherhood is going to be in the collection of the ICA in Boston, which is great. So
It's so exciting, Kathy, to see these paintings making their way into the world. And it suggests perhaps, Kathy, that we, among other things, can consider you something of a history something of a history painter, somebody who is in a very important way responding to the demands of the pandemic. I was very struck by a comment I heard you make during a recent conversation with Nancy Princenthal, and I loved your comment that whatever we're doing, it has been made in a global pandemic and with it, and inevitably it affects the work. It's very mysterious.
There we are. It seems more present time than ever, doesn't it?
It really is, I think, extraordinary. And as you were saying, Kathy, having some sense of the context in which Fear of Dark emerged, I think helps us to understand some of the larger philosophical claims of the painting. And I'm just going to move through a couple of pieces very rapidly here, but Mother Joins the Circus, of course, grows out of a slightly earlier canvas with a similar title, suggesting the persistence of some of these ideas and their expressions, the evolution of their expressions. We had an opportunity to speak to Mother's Lap a moment ago, and this is headed for the ICA in Boston. Is that right, Kathy?
No, it's going to be shown at Harvard's Carpenter Center in the fall.
Wonderful! Oh, terrific! We'll look forward to seeing it in that context. And Mother's Lap, of course, we'll have an opportunity to see at the Brooklyn Museum of Art. which will be extremely welcome. And Kathy, last summer, as you were working on these pieces and developing the relationships between these mother paintings and Fear of Dark, you shot a little video of what you were doing in the studio, and I'd love to just share it with our audiences.
Summer of 2020, and I am working in a studio which is in a big mill in the center of town. I arrived here from New York. My children were calling every day, "Mom, leave, get out. There are no ventilators for people in your age group." So I made, during my quarantine for 14 days, I made a lot of works on paper, and this one kind of got away from me. I wanted it to be 3 people, and it ended up being 3 people sitting on each other's laps. And I thought, well, maybe that's where we want to be, mother's lap, place of solace. And I thought, when I finally got to painting, well, I like doing horizontal figures. I never had enough of a reason. So here's a woman in an orange dress, and the head of a figure is lying on her orange dress. Then I remembered I had done, a while ago, I had done a big painting of a yellow dress with an ample lap. And I thought, maybe I could do a big painting of mother's lap, where you want to be during a pandemic. Here she is. She's got 2 people already sitting on her lap and a 3rd one waiting to hop up. It seems to me that if you provide a lap, or you go sit on someone's lap for a while, that eventually you will be the one to provide a lap.
And so, Kathy, it's fascinating to think about this context of the lap sitters as a backdrop against which Fear of Dark was emerging.
And you know what's so great is we're both in Brunswick, Maine. These were made in Brunswick, Maine. How'd we do that, Anne? Get this, get this circling back to our hometown.
It's just remarkable. The your story about your contact with your children and their solicitude for your well-being as one of the ingredients that was helping perhaps on some level to mitigate some of the really profound dislocations and disturbances of the past summer is very poignant to me. And I wonder whether you feel that ingredient of mother's love, of family connectedness, is one of the things perhaps that enables some bright spots to shine through a painting that explicitly gets at the notion of darkness.
That's a great phrase, Anne. Thank you for that phrase, bright spots shining through. That's the phrase I needed. I was calling them stars and planets. They are, in fact, bright spots, not that bright, but there they are.
And Kathy, I wonder if, especially as we see Fear of Dark with this, with a palette that evokes nighttime, and a night which I think is not only literal but metaphoric, juxtaposed with two other works in this series that have a much brighter tonality. And I know how sensitive you are about your use of color. Might you be able to say a little bit about where this notion of darkness came from? I know we can all imagine many of the associations that any of us may have had with respect to notions of darkness last summer, but it would be wonderful to hear how this evolved in your mind.
Last summer, I heard newscasters use the word dark over and over again. They thought it was dark times. They felt there were darkness ahead. They kept using the phrase light at the end of the tunnel. I think we all felt the need for a metaphor to explain what was happening. And that was one of them. And perhaps I made use of it.
Absolutely. And Kathy, one of the other things that I find incredibly intriguing and would love to delve into more deeply with you is this question of where the structure for the painting itself comes from. So maybe I'll just quickly flip back to our lap sitters, where the formal relationship is very clear to us, looking back on this painting from the vantage point of 2021. But could you share with us a little bit about how this painting emerged formally?
Yes.
Where it came from?
This is how the painting began. I put colors down randomly. These are colors I like, the purples and the oranges and the reds. I didn't know what the painting would look like. At this point, I thought maybe it might turn into a landscape. But I'm very interested in people, in figures, in the landscape, or just in figures. So my next move, you can see in the next slide, was to put a figure standing upright, right in the center. And that was a bad move. It was too stiff. It called all the attention to that center figure. And I saw this little blue figure over on one side sitting, and I wanted to keep the little blue figure and completely edit out the center figure. So my next move was to put more figures in, echoing the little blue figure. And my next problem was there was too much color going up in the top part in the sky. If it were going to be a painting about these three people and their relationship, I had to tone down the ground. And so I would come in every morning and I'd agonize, should I take away those beautiful red bright spots, as Anne said? And I thought, oh, maybe I'll just ruin the whole painting. But it just became apparent to me that there was too much visually going on. So I took them out, or I took purple paint and put a layer over them, which is the next thing I did.
Let's see, I'm going to hop forward a couple of slides to.
So it looked dark. So it was dark. Not too dark. And this painting is almost done. Do you think this is the final Fear of Dark? No. I had one more decision to make, and that is, should I take away the four smaller figures down, the four smaller bright spots down by the blue legs over there on my left? And I finally did, just so we would look at the sky and we would look at the figures, and we wouldn't be distracted by anything else. So the final painting is, maybe you've seen it enough to know.
We have, but no, I'm going to pop back to that, Kathy. I don't think we can see it enough. And this also just gives us a little overview.
So you see, it's just top, bright spots, and 3 figures. So I edited. I left the 2 feet sitting in some kind of ether or water, which people asked me about because it wasn't clear how somebody could be sitting on water and putting their feet in water. However, I liked the way it looked. So it's mysterious, as they say.
Kathy, could you clarify for us at what point the composition, as it was undergoing this grand metamorphosis from landscape to figural painting to a pair of figures with a standing figure and then a seated figure to this configuration of a group of 3, at what point did you know this painting was Fear of Dark?
I didn't. It took me a while. I think when you visited my studio in August, Anne, I showed you this painting among at least a dozen others. And I think it takes time to know which ones are going to be important, be more significant, or going to last, or going to be meaningful. And I can be wrong about that. Sometimes I'm attached to paintings that actually I'm the only one who's attached to them.
It's interesting. So did the title, Kathy, did the title, was the title a significantly later addition to the painting?
No, because I think you have some images here of paintings I've done.
Yes, indeed.
That also, this is Fear of Waves. I had done Fear of Onions. Oh, I can still laugh about that.
And I think Fear
And this is Fear of Shoes. I did this painting. It was about something. I wasn't quite sure what. So I called it Fear of Shoes. And one thing I've learned is that I don't have to tell everything. I don't have to, I'm not writing a manual. I'm making a work of art, and it exists on many levels, in many layers. So Fear of Shoes suggests something.
And Kathy, one of the things that we had fun talking a little bit about was, at least for me as an art historian, the way in which Fear of Shoes resonated with Van Gogh's treatment of the subject of shoes, you know, in the late 19th century. And this is a painting that has generated a lot of philosophical discourse, including Martin Heidegger and Jacques Derrida, who actually comments on the awkwardness of these shoes and the fact that it almost looks as though Van Gogh is portraying 2 left feet. And that notion of awkwardness, I don't know if we can necessarily point to humor per se in Van Gogh's work, but certainly a sense of vulnerability grows out of these pieces, which is something
they're so human, those shoes.
Right.
And they've had such a life. It was enough for a painting, old shoes.
Absolutely. And Kathy, one of the things that the vulnerability of Van Gogh's shoes got me thinking a little bit about with respect to your painting, and this is, I think, one of its great strengths, is that you are able to combine vulnerability with tenderness. And as we think about the larger set of paintings, these mother paintings or these lap-sitting paintings that may convey something of the warmth of familial bonds and the type of strength we gather from them, I was so intrigued to see that another painting that emerged during the same period that perhaps alerts us to vulnerability, failure to keep certain facades in place, is this painting of Mother Knows. And to me, it begs the question of just what does Mother know?
certainly does, doesn't it? Why are those pants down?
Right, right. It's an absolutely, it's a fascinating piece that provokes our thought. And Kathy, I think it also gets at the important role that figures have played in so many of your paintings. And I was intrigued when you mentioned that as viewers were responding to Fear of Dark when it went on view last spring, that you found that it was really the figures to which viewers were responding in their social media posts.
Yes, people were posting details. And as I went through the details, I think I have a few more here.
Uh-huh.
It was the people in the painting. All those beautiful bright spots. People seem to take them for granted.
It's fascinating. I love this bright spot, for example, and even the use of a fluorescent paint in the composition.
Right.
And speaking of the use of fluorescent paint in the composition, one of the other things, Kathy, which I think is so exciting about looking at your work is the extraordinary way in which you, I think, help make us as viewers aware of some of the layers, the physical layers that reside within the surface of a canvas. Layers that, of course, have so many metaphorical associations, as we've been discussing.
Yes, and I think I found when I switched from oil paint to acrylic paint, and my medium is water, just water, I don't add anything else, that if I used big hardware store brushes, that I could make a whole leg in one stroke of the brush. I could just gently draw it over the color, and it would have the kind of luminosity that often our of human flesh does. I had to invent a way to make people, because I didn't have a conventional art education. I didn't have foundation courses, which was in some ways an advantage, because I had to use my ingenuity about how I was going to go about learning to make something recognizable and believable. I'm sure people take issue with what I'm doing, but these brushes helped a lot. And at the end of the summer, some of them were so worn out and caked with paint that I wrote 2018 on them, and I gave them to the other artists who I had been working with over the summer. They were gifts.
And
They became decoration.
And Kathy, you've also talked about the way in which that paintbrush, one of those paintbrushes, has even become a talisman for you.
Yes, exactly. I feel very strongly that with all these outer events that have captured us in the past few years, including the election, that we have to protect our inner life and hold on to it, and not have the news usurp all our strongest emotions. I think it's very important, and I've paid more attention to the news than I ever have, but I felt my inner life was what was producing the paintings.
It's beautiful. And Kathy, as we think about how these paintings make their way from your studio into the public eye, I just want to turn to a wonderful moment from the conclusion of your exhibition
at the Canada
this past
Gallery
spring.
Of Kathy Bradford's. Oh my gosh, wait a minute. It's the artist herself. What is she doing? It's very strange. She's running laps around the gallery. It's very odd. Which also, it's a victory lap on her last day.
Kathy, I love that victory lap.
Did we just lose the image? What happened?
Oh, are you seeing my screen, Kathy?
I'm seeing join a live Zoom demo. Why is that?
Let's see. I'm going to troubleshoot by turning to my colleague, Sabrina Lynn. Sabrina? Let's see.
It seems okay from my end. Kathy, I'm not
Okay,
sure.
well, never mind. I think that was a great finale there. Thank you, Anne. That was my nephew who just spontaneously was the MC for my run around the gallery.
And Kathy, that moment of victory, I think it's a victory maybe that all of us were beginning to feel last spring as we rounded the corner with vaccinations and the beginning of a return to public life moves me very much. And it's a theme actually that this notion of hopefulness, which I think also runs through so many of your paintings. And I'm showing now, Kathy, I don't know if you can see it, but your gouache Dive from Yellow of 2020, which shows a bathing figure once again springing upwards. And let's see, did we lose? Oh, here's Kathy, good. Springing upwards, just as your just as the blue and red figure was springing upward in 2012. And Kathy, it puts me in mind of another painting I love, Older Woman Superhero of 2017. And it does strike me that one of your many extraordinary strengths is your ability, I think, both to acknowledge the darkness that resides around us, not to shy away from it, but perhaps to embrace it, to acknowledge it, and to help us in turn, perhaps with a little extra sense of humor, find our own ways of standing up to those fears that might otherwise threaten to consume us. So thank you, Kathy, so much for pointing out the bright spots, for helping us learn how to laugh about some of the challenges that we might face, and also for sharing with us both something of the evolution of fear of dark, as well as its larger context within the work you were doing last summer.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to show, if I can, that this older woman superhero was made into a mug.
So fabulous. Kathy, I think you're going to be getting a lot of requests. I'm sure many of us will want to find out where we can order that mug to power ourselves up in the mornings. But
You're going to go to questions now?
Yes, let's do that. I'm going to end the slideshow for right now. And let's see if that actually, let's see, Sabrina. Oh, here we go. Perfect. Now I think we can turn more easily to the questions. Let's see. So we will do our best to work our way through the various questions that have come in. And I want to open with a question that I think raises a very important point about your painting, Kathy, and that is the question of scale. Jerry Bassett writes that that they loved looking at some earlier paintings that were quite small. Do you like working on a larger scale now?
Oh, yes, I do. I'm showing in larger spaces. I like life-size figures. I like standing in front of a painting that I can see the whole thing. I don't have to get up close to it. Do you see Fear of Dark behind Anne? She's very cleverly sitting in the gallery with the painting right behind her. And as you walk in, you can walk right up to it. I think if it took me quite a few years to build up to that size. And if you went to my studio today, you would see that that's the size I'm working in. If you go to Colbeck Gallery, you'd see that I also do book size paintings too.
And Kathy, I think your comment about the evolution in scale of your paintings, from smaller works to the larger paintings that you are focused on right now, maybe also provides a nice segue to another question which came in from Mary Claire Foa, who observes, and I think there's a little speculation in here, that you seem to begin with randomly putting down colors. Then you added a figure. Did you add the figure because you saw the hint of a shape of a figure there already? Are you following a pareidolia process? For example, when you seem to see a face in a piece of toast, for example.
Ah, now there's the word, pareidolia, which I have never used in my life. Yes, I think I am. I think I'm trying to stay in the moment. I'm very conscious of what's happening right in front of me and pulling images out of the paint. I knew that standing figure wasn't going to help me. I had to get rid of it. I should have taken more pictures in the progress of Fear of Dark.
And Kathy, I wonder if I can just build on Mary Claire's question for just a second to bring up two paintings that we actually didn't have a chance to talk about, but which I think fit with this question in a really interesting fashion. I'm just going to share my screen once more. Go back to the slideshow for a moment, because one of the things that I enjoyed discussing with you as we were looking forward to this talk was this pair of paintings that were created, and let's see if I can just share this, that have some, let's see if I'm doing this properly. I hope folks can, oh, here we go, sorry. Let's see if I can do this properly. We looked at, Kathy, a pair of paintings that have interesting formal similarities to aspects of Fear of Dark, but which went in a slightly different direction in terms of the ultimate resolution. For example, in this instance, Various Heads, perhaps we could see a painting about identity. Or in another instance, Looking Out to Sea, a painting that becomes about perhaps the connection of two people who are, facing the world together. So it is indeed intriguing how these, how your capacity to respond to the formal qualities of a work of art also perhaps creates these different thematic associations for you.
Well, I think that's what I mean by inner life. It's your vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
Bright spots, the figures built out of colored blocks. That are my tools to build my paintings on. And as you just said so beautifully, I can take them in all different directions. Don't you think this is a Maine painting, Anne?
I do. I do.
Imagining all sorts of cosmic events taking place on the horizon.
Absolutely. I would say that. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Main cloud. It's a spectacular piece. And Kathy, another question has come in about your training and your background. One of our audience members notes how uncontrived and refreshing your work is. and was curious about whether you were quote unquote an outsider artist, by which I think that individual is getting at your comfort with moving away from certain academic traditions. But of course, actually you have very strong, you in fact have been formally trained. You do have your MFA. Would you like to say a little bit about your training?
I haven't been formally trained. I didn't take foundation courses. I didn't spend lots and lots of time doing life drawing.
Mm-hmm.
I know students in schools that I taught at had to learn anatomy and perspective and rendering, all those things I was not interested in. I was following other artists. Matisse
Mm-hmm.
was one, Guston was another that interested me. I was interested in the way people who did graphic novels did their people. They were contemporary and economic. And a lot of people have asked me about why I don't put facial features in my work. And I don't, because one, I'm interested in shapes and I don't do that many details. I've just begun to do fingers and feet. And two, once you put the expressions on someone's face, it's a whole nother ball game. It takes you away from the abstraction that I love so much, the geometry that my work is really rooted in. You can call me an outsider artist. You can call me a folk artist. You can say my work is childlike. You can say it's crude. Please don't say it's naive. And especially don't say it's faux naive. I'd rather be totally naive than faux naive.
Well, Kathy, I think there's no question that there is a sense of something very powerful, a directness of expression that grows out of your work. And perhaps on that note, we could turn to our final question for the evening and ask you if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about what you are working on right now in August of 2021.
Oh my. I'm working on big paintings. I have some exciting things ahead that I would like to show my best work. It puts a lot of pressure, a lot of intensity into my day-to-day studio life, which sometimes I rail against, like, oh, all these cars passing outside, they're all going to the beach. And I'm trying to decide if this painting is any good or should I paint it over. I just got a message. I just got a text from my nephew who liked the fact that I showed him in the show describing my lap around the gallery. If you want to know what themes I'm working on, I'm doing some more paintings of people carrying each other. I think that's got a lot more ways to go than I've explored. And I post my work on Instagram as a way to stay in touch and to have people stay in touch with what I'm doing.
Kathy, I can't think of a nicer invitation for all of us to stay engaged with you, to continue to watch how things evolve. I think yesterday when I was looking at your Instagram stream, that I saw one of those carrying paintings that was perhaps getting at the larger question of the history of painting itself. So,
oh, really?
yes. So as as always, Kathy, you leave us with so many big questions. And we are so appreciative of the extraordinary work you do, the extraordinary reflections that you provide us upon our world, and the universes that you open up for us to explore. We are so grateful to you for your time this evening. And I know that we are all excited to see the exhibition down at the Carpenter Center this fall. We can't wait for the retrospective next summer being organized by the Portland Museum of Art. That will be a great treat. Thank you so much for being with us this evening, and many thanks to our audience for being with us. We are very much looking forward to an exciting fall ahead with a rich range of programming. So please stay tuned for upcoming events. And Kathy, thank you again for this wonderful and insightful discussion. We greatly appreciate it.
And thank you so much for guiding me through this with your words and your insights. It's been lovely.
Thank you. Thank you. It's always a pleasure. I always learn so much, Kathy, from you, and thank you again. And we wish you and everyone else a lovely evening. Take care.